Hi, my name's Holly. I'm a computer science tutor and I run Teach All About It. Today we're going to be looking at a technical past paper question for the use of SQL from the AQA A-Level Computer Science syllabus. By looking at a real student answer, by the end of this video you're going to be able to understand exactly what the examiner is looking for this particularly technical question for you to be able to get full marks. So let's get started. So here we have an A-level question, very specifically giving us lots of information. And for this one, we have a database question that has actually been combined with an RFID reader. And this student has sent this one in for me because they're happy with the RFID side of things, but struggling a little bit with the SQL. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this and then get you to pause the video and tell me what you would do in order to answer this question. So we know that we're going to have to describe how an RFID reader is going to work. We need to talk about the product ID and also the item ID, which is being read in based upon these palettes. And then we need to talk about how we would update the stock database table or the database table based upon the warehouse. And then you need to include types of SQL statements, and really important, you do not need to write any SQL code. So there's no need to write long reams of SQL here, but you do need to refer to the types of statements that you would use. Okay, so pause the video, have a go yourself, and then we'll look at our student's answer. Okay, so how did you do? In this case, we actually didn't have a student answer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to model the answer for you. So in this case, the student has done really well to highlight the things that they have found in the context, which is the side on the left. And they've talked about the palettes and they've talked about the barcodes. And in this case, I need to start off with a describe. Now, this one is describe how the RFID would read the product ID and item ID from the tag on the pallet. So I may well start off with a very specific question here, so actually saying what RFID is. If they haven't actually already defined it, then we probably want to do that. Now, all they've told us at this point is that RFID stands for radio frequency identification, and that it's going to actually store these two pieces of data. So here I may well explain why I would be using RFID, how it's scanned. I'm going to give a description or a definition. The next thing I'm going to then do is it's explaining what happens as they are delivered. So let's highlight that one as well. So they are being delivered. It's nothing to do with going out of the warehouse. It's all coming in, and explain how the data could be used to update the database table. Now that's important. They've already told us that there's an update in there. So in this case, I'm going to have a look at the two tables. So down here in figure 10, it gives me an idea of what's in the product table. Now that product table gives me the ID, the description, and the quantity in stock. And figure 9 shows me a palette of items, and each of those items holds the same product. Now what that tells me is that I can draw an entity relationship diagram, because an item can be popped over here as an entity, and then we also have a product table. Now we know that one product can appear in many item lists. So item 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, they are all the same product. So we've got something going on here that means that we've got a bit of an entity relationship diagram. We could talk about there being maybe a select. Now we also want to know what happens when things are delivered. So when things are delivered, we might want to double check that they are correct. So therefore, if they are correct, we want to look at the item that we have received. That means we want to do something that a database can do. And if you think about what a database can do, we can put CRUD. All databases are CRUD. That means they create, you can read, you can update, and delete. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's always going to be the SQL statement, but it is the 4 things that a database can do. If I want to read, I'm going to select some data. So that might be my next mark. I might want to talk about selecting the items that I've got. Now, if I selected a combination using a where clause, so maybe from tables or database, where, now notice here I'm putting it in capital letters. You don't have to do that in the real thing. This is just to highlight it. If you're writing actual SQL, please do put them in capital letters. So here I might select from that table or the database where the product ID and item ID is the same as the one that's been scanned. So here I'm then talking about the scanned version from the RFID that then goes into an SQL as a parameter. Now remember, a parameter is a piece of data that you pass into either a function, or in this case, you are passing that parameter into your SQL statement. It is a parameterized SQL statement. And of course, if you're doing AQA, you'll recognize this from your NEA. So in this case, we are doing a select statement to check that the product that we have received is actually the one that's on the pallet. Now, once we've confirmed that it is correct, we can then do our next mark. Now, you're probably going to have got 2 marks from that middle one, and we're aiming for 2 marks from our 3rd bullet point. Because once we've confirmed it's correct, we then want to do an update. So we are then probably going to update, and we know exactly what we're going to update because it's right here. It's the quantity in stock. So update the quantity in stock, and we're going to be really specific here. Quantity in stock, and we're going to write this in the product table. And we're not just overriding, we're updating, and what we're doing is we are incrementing. And that simply means we are adding to the current value of. So we are updating the quantity in stock in the product table to increment the number arrived. You could even put on the pallet. It does depend on whether figure 9 actually includes sort of a quantity in there. So we have our quantity in stock, we have our product ID, so one product will have many items. It's worth mentioning that. You could even put your entity relationship diagram inside your explanation as long as you back it up with some text. So with a 6 marker, if you understand how RFID works, that means that you can pull in that data and then you don't necessarily have to write your SQL code. In fact, it says you don't have to. You just explain how you would use each of those statements. So one select for error checking and then updating for stock control. And there's your 6 marks. So would you like your question featured in one of these videos? Please do hit the subscribe button and don't forget the notification bell. And you can submit your GCSE, IGCSE or A-level computer science questions at www.teachallaboutit.school.